Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to review this proposed professional learning plan for the upcoming school year. Before discussing specific professional learning activities, I want to begin by sharing the vision that guided the development of this plan. Our goal is to build collaborative culture where every educator continuously improves instruction through professional learning communities that focus on student learning. This plan is not intended to introduce another initiative or increase teacher workloads. Instead, it is designed to strengthen the collaborative structures that are already built and existing within our school and ensure they consistently lead to improved instructional practices and better outcomes for students. The purpose of this professional learning plan is to strengthen our PLCs by increasing collaboration, improving how we use student evidence to guide instruction, especially in CTAE, and creating greater consistency across collaborative teams. Throughout my PLC continuum reflections, I found that while strong systems are already in place, implementation varies among teams and opportunities remain to deepen those collaborative practices that we're currently using. Rather than investing in outside consultants or additional programs, this proposal relies entirely on existing resources, including our PLC meetings, collaborative planning, faculty meetings, our instructional coach, administrators, and teacher leaders. This approach reflects the Learning Forward Leadership Standard, which emphasizes that school leaders establish the conditions necessary for professional learning, and the Resources Standard, which encourages schools to strategically leverage existing personnel and structures to improve educator practice. As Dufour and colleagues explain in Learning by Doing, meaningful school improvement occurs when educators continuously collaborate, examine evidence of student learning, and collectively take responsibility for improving outcomes for every student. So again, this is just kind of a review of the purpose. We're looking for just overall strength in our PLC, continuing to dig deeper. But I think the more important question is the why now. And that is because we have such a good system going, but it has been brought to my attention, especially from newer teachers, some room for improvement. And I think this would really bring us to the next level as a PLC for CTAE, but also as a professional learning community as a school. Now, before developing the professional learning calendar, I wanted to identify the areas that would have the greatest impact on improving teaching and learning within our school. Rather than selecting topics based on personal preference, I analyzed evidence gathered throughout this course from my PLC Continuum self-assessments, weekly reflections, observations of current collaborative practices, and valuable feedback provided by classmates during our discussion board conversations. These multiple sources of qualitative evidence consistently pointed toward three common areas for improvement: strengthening collective commitments, improving the use of data to guide instruction, and increasing consistency across the PLC communities. The first priority area focuses on developing stronger collective commitments and shared ownership for student success. While collaborative teams already exist, implementation again does vary, and opportunities again still exist to strengthen that collective responsibility. Instead of my kids and your kids, changing that more to our kids. Now, the second area focuses on helping teachers use assessment evidence to improve instruction and monitor interventions more effectively. And the last area addresses consistency across PLC implementation, as that is an area that we really struggle with. But this would help us kind of follow that same improvement process kind of across groups, no matter when we're meeting or who we're meeting with, while still kind of maintaining the flexibility of student needs. These three priorities will serve as the framework for the professional learning experiences presented throughout the remainder of this plan. Again, as Dufour and colleagues explain in Learning by Doing, collaborative teams are most successful when they focus on continuous improvement, shared responsibility, and evidence-based decision making, making these three appropriate priorities for our school's professional learning efforts. Excuse me. Now, our first focus area is collective commitments. The first area of focus is strengthening collective commitments and shared ownership for student learning. Throughout my PLC continuum assessments, this area consistently emerged as an opportunity for growth because collaboration existed, but implementation varied among collaborative teams. Some PLCs naturally embrace shared responsibility, while others continue to focus primarily on individual classrooms. Discussion board feedback further supported this observation, with several classmates recommending that schools intentionally create opportunities for teachers to celebrate successes, observe one another, and develop greater ownership of school-wide student achievement, rather than viewing students as belonging only to individual teachers. This focus area intentionally aligns with 3 Learning Forward standards. The Learning Foundation standard emphasizes that professional learning should be grounded in a shared vision for improving educator practice and student outcomes. The Leadership standard recognizes that school leaders are responsible for creating the conditions that allow collaboration and continuous improvement to flourish. Finally, the Culture of Collaborative Inquiry standard promotes trusting relationships where educators work together, reflect together, and solve problems collectively. These standards directly support one of the central themes of learning by doing, which emphasizes that effective PLCs develop common commitments and collective responsibility for each student's success, rather than working in isolation. So, for our first PD session, we'll be focusing on the PLC culture. Our first PD session occurs during pre-planning and establishes the foundation for the remainder of the school year. Teachers will collaboratively develop team norms, collective commitments, and SMART goals aligned with each school improvement priority. Rather than the administrators creating these expectations independently, collaborative teams will participate in developing shared commitments that guide their work throughout the year. Beginning with the collaborative process increases teacher ownership while establishing consistency across every PLC before students return to school. This professional learning experience intentionally reflects several Learning Forward standards. The Learning Foundation standards emphasize developing a shared understanding of why educators engage in continuous learning, while the Leadership standard reminds school leaders to establish structures that support educator growth, rather than simply directing improvement efforts. Additionally, the Culture of Collaborative Inquiry standard encourages educators to work together in ways that build trust, strengthen relationships, and improve instructional practice. These ideas closely align, again, with the Learning by Doing, where Dufour and colleagues explain that effective professional learning communities begin with a clearly defined mission, vision, collective commitments, and SMART goals that remain visible throughout the year. By the end of the session, every PLC will leave with common norms, measurable goals, and a shared commitment to improve student learning. Now, by October, we will have our second PD session, and collaborative teams will have established routines and begun implementing their SMART goals. The next phase of the professional learning focuses on strengthening collaboration through peer observations, collaborative lesson studies, and teacher strategy showcases. These observations are designed solely for professional growth rather than evaluation. It's important that everybody feels safe to explore these options without feeling like they're being graded. Teachers will have opportunities to observe effective instructional strategies, discuss successful classroom practices, and reflect on how those ideas can be adapted within their own classrooms. This PL experience was directly influenced by suggestions from classmates who recommended peer observations and teacher-led sharing sessions as effective strategies for moving PLCs from developing to sustaining level. This session is going to intentionally support several Learning Forward standards, including the Professional Expertise Standard, which emphasizes that educators improve through meaningful professional learning experience that strengthen instructional practice. The Curriculum Standard, which encourages teachers to work collaboratively to ensure students receive equitable and rigorous learning experiences. as well as the learning practices standard, which promotes active collaborative learning that engages educators in authentic problem solving rather than passive participation. These standards reinforce the philosophy presented in Learning by Doing, which reminds us that collaborative teams become stronger when educators openly examine instructional practices, learn from one another, and continuously seek better ways to improve student learning. Because this learning occurs during existing PLC meetings and planning periods using teacher expertise already available within the school, again, it remains completely cost neutral while maximizing professional growth. All right, our second area of focus is strengthening how collaborative teams use data to improve instruction. Throughout my PLC Continuing Reflections, I consistently rated our school highly for collecting and discussing student data, but I did identify an opportunity for growth in using that information to drive instructional decisions, mainly because our feedback loop takes a little bit longer than it should to be using it effectively in the classroom. Teachers regularly review common assessment results, but the depth of those conversations vary among PLCs. In some cases, teams identify trends but do not consistently determine how instruction should change or how interventions should be monitored. In addition, discussion board feedback echoed this challenge, with several classmates recommending structured data dips, peer collaboration, and more intentional monitoring of intervention effectiveness. Those suggestions directly influenced the professional learning experience included in this plan. This focus area aligns closely with the philosophy presented in Learning by Doing, where it emphasizes that collaborative teams should continuously answer the 4 critical PLC questions using evidence of student learning rather than assumptions or intuition. Likewise, the Learning Forward Assessment Standard encourages educators to use multiple sources of student data to guide PL and instructional improvement. The evidence standard extends this work by emphasizing that professional learning should ultimately be evaluated based on changes in educator practice and student outcomes. Throughout this section of the plan, collaborative teams will learn how to move beyond simple reviewing data and instead use the evidence to improve instruction, strengthen interventions, and increase student achievement. Our January PL session introduces a structured data dip protocol that will become part of every PLC meeting. Rather than reviewing large amounts of assessment information at one time, teachers will examine one specific standard, one common assessment, or one group of students during each meeting. Teams will collaboratively analyze student work, identify instructional strengths and weaknesses, determine which teaching strategies were successful, and create immediate action plans for reteaching or enrichment in some cases. Beginning with smaller focused conversations encourages greater teacher participation while making data analysis a natural part of collaborative planning rather than an overwhelming task. This PL session intentionally integrates 3 Learning Forward standards: the assessment standard, which emphasizes using multiple sources of student learning data to guide educator growth and improve instruction; the evidence standard, which encourages collaborative teams to evaluate the effectiveness of instructional practices by examining student performance rather than relying on perceptions; and finally, the learning design standard reminds us that professional learning should actively engage educators in authentic problem solving that directly impacts classroom instruction. By the end of this session, every PLC should leave with specific instructional next steps supported by evidence from student learning, as well as a new strategy to implement during meetings. Now, following several months of consistent data analysis, collaborative teams will begin evaluating the effectiveness of interventions during 6-week review cycles. Rather than allowing interventions to remain unchanged throughout the year, teachers will regularly examine progress monitoring data to determine whether instructional supports are producing measurable student growth. When interventions are not producing the desired outcomes, collaborative teams will adjust instructional strategies, regroup students, or modify the intervention plans. The systematic review process ensures that decisions remain responsive to students' needs rather than becoming the routine procedures that we know them as now. This learning experience incorporates the assessment, evidence, and implementation standards for the our learning standards. While the assessment standard supports the use of progress monitoring, the evidence standard encourages educators to evaluate the effectiveness of instructional decisions through student outcomes. The implementation standard extends this work by emphasizing sustained application of professional learning within classrooms over time. And this process also reflects one of the central themes in learning by doing, which again is collaborative teams developing systematic responses when students do not learn at expected levels, rather than waiting until the end of the grading period when it's too late to help. Through continuous monitoring and timely instructional adjustments, interventions become more intentional, effective, and responsive to individual student needs. The third focus area addresses consistency across PLCs. Throughout my continuum assessments and peer discussions, one common theme consistently emerged. While collaborative structures exist, implementation varies significantly among teams, especially the CTAE team, as we are all kind of singletons but grouped together. Some PLCs consistently analyze student work, monitor SMART goals, and develop intervention plans, while others focus primarily on lesson planning or organizational tasks. Several classmates observed similar challenges within their schools and recommended establishing common expectations, shared PLC protocols, and stronger accountability systems to increase consistency across the collaborative teams. These observations reinforce the importance of creating a common improvement process while still allowing flexibility for those individual subject areas and departments. This focus area reflects several learning forward standards, including the leadership standard, which emphasizes creating organizational conditions that support continuous educator learning. It also reflects the learning practices standard, encouraging active collaboration among educators, and the resource standard, which focuses on maximizing existing personnel, collaborative planning time, and school resources to support professional growth. These principles also closely mirror learning by doing, which explains that successful PLCs establish common expectations, shared responsibility, and consistent collaborative processes across the entire school. By strengthening consistency among collaborative teams, we improve instructional coherence while ensuring that every student benefits from high-quality collaborative practices. During April, collaborative teams will expand beyond grade level planning by participating in vertical articulation meetings. Teachers from multiple subject areas or content areas will examine curriculum progression, prerequisite skills, assessment expectations, and instructional strategies to ensure students experience a guaranteed and viable curriculum throughout the school. These conversations help educators better understand how learning develops across content areas while identifying opportunities to eliminate instructional gaps and unnecessary repetition. Vertical collaboration also strengthens professional relationships among teachers who may not regularly collaborate but share responsibility for preparing students for future successes. This session intentionally supports the curriculum standard, which emphasizes equitable access to rigorous learning opportunities for all students. The resource standard encourages schools to maximize existing collaborative structures and educator expertise, while the leadership standard reminds administrators to create the conditions necessary for meaningful collaboration. These standards strongly support one of the foundational principles of learning by doing, which emphasizes developing a guaranteed and viable curriculum through collaborative planning. By strengthening vertical alignment, teachers gain a deeper understanding of learning progressions, while increasing instructional consistency across the school. Our last PD session, would be reflection. Our final professional learning session provides collaborative teams with an opportunity to reflect on the progress made throughout the year and identify priorities for future improvement. Teachers will revisit the SMART goals developed during pre-planning, analyze student growth data, evaluate their intervention effectiveness, and discuss which professional learning experience had the greatest impact on instructional practice. Rather than viewing reflection as a conclusion of professional learning, teams will use this information to develop recommendations for the following school year, ensuring that continuous improvement becomes an ongoing process rather than an annual event. This session intentionally reflects the implementation, leadership, and learning foundation standards. The implementation standard emphasizes sustaining educator learning over time, while the leadership standard encourages admin to foster continuous organizational improvement. The learning foundation standard reminds educators that professional learning should remain focused on improving both educator effectiveness and student success. The final reflection creates a bridge between one school year and the next, allowing improvement efforts to continue rather than restarting fresh in August. Now, monitoring implementation is going to be essential to determining whether professional learning is producing meaningful changes in educator practice as well as student learning. Throughout the school year, administrators and teacher leaders will collect evidence from multiple sources, including PLC agendas and meeting minutes, classroom walkthroughs, teacher reflections, SMART goal progress, intervention data, and common assessment results. Collecting multiple forms of evidence allows leadership to monitor both the implementation of professional learning and its impact on classroom instruction. If data indicates that collaborative teams need additional support, professional learning can be adjusted throughout the year rather than waiting until the following school year. The monitoring process directly reflects the evidence standard, which emphasizes evaluating professional learning through changes in educator practice and student achievement. It also supports the assessment standard, which encourages ongoing use of student learning data to guide instructional decisions, and the implementation standard, which focuses on sustaining changes in practice over time. The purpose of collecting evidence is not simply to document participation, but to determine whether collaborative efforts are actually improving outcomes for students. By monitoring implementation continuously, school leaders can make informed decisions that support long-term success. This year-long timeline demonstrates how professional learning builds throughout the school year rather than occurring in isolated workshops. Beginning in August, collaborative teams establish norms, collective commitments to SMART goals. During the fall, teachers strengthen collaboration through peer observations and strategy sharing before transitioning into deeper data analysis during January. As teams become more confident using evidence to guide instruction, PL shifts towards intervention review, broader collaboration, and year-end reflection. Each learning experience intentionally builds upon the previous one, creating a continuous cycle of learning, implementation, reflection, and refinement. Another important aspect of this timeline is that, every activity is completely cost neutral. Existing PLC meetings, collaborative planning periods, faculty meetings, instructional coaches, administration, and teacher leaders provide all the resources necessary for implementation. By distributing learning across the entire school year, teachers receive ongoing support that encourages sustainable improvement as well as strengthening our current school culture. In conclusion, this professional learning plan was intentionally developed using evidence from PLC continuum assessments, peer recommendations, the Learning Forward standards, and the research presented in Learning by Doing. The plan focuses on strengthening collective commitments, improving data-informed instruction, and creating greater consistency across PLCs. Each professional learning experience is job-embedded, collaborative, and designed to occur within existing school structures, allowing for meaningful educator growth without additional financial resources. By intentionally aligning every activity with learning forward standards, this plan ensures that professional learning remains focused on improving educator effectiveness and student achievement. Ultimately, the success of this plan will not be measured by the number of professional development sessions completed, but by the impact those experiences have on classroom instruction and student learning. By implementing this cost-neutral year-long professional learning plan, our school can strengthen collaboration, improve instructional consistency, and create a sustainable culture of continuous improvement that benefits every educator and every student. And here are my references. Thank you so much for your time, and that is all I have.